The first thing I carried into that house was not a box. It was silence. The kind that sits heavy on a street that's used to seeing its queen march up and down with a clipboard. My truck door groaned open. The morning air smelled like cut grass and warm pavement. Sprinklers ticked. A dog barked twice, then stopped, as if even the animals knew to pay attention. I lifted the first box kitchen stuff, marked in blue marker, and set it on the porch of the small brick place that sat just outside the clean, white fence line of Willow Creek. A single concrete seam 18 inches wide ran like a scar between their world and mine. On their side, matching mailboxes and painted curbs and lawn heights measured in inches. On my side, old oak, rough driveway, a house that didn't ask permission to breathe. I heard her heels before I saw her. Fast, clipping across asphalt. Click, click, click like a metronome on anger. By the time I turned, the president of the Willow Creek HOA had already breached the seam, a paper clenched in her hand the way some people hold a weapon, hair lacquered into weatherproof helmet, lipstick so precise it looked like it was applied with a ruler. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't look at the welcome mat. She went straight for the jugular. "You can't live here," she shouted, voice pitched for porches. Curtains around us fluttered like startled birds. Phones appeared between slats. She jabbed the paper toward my nose. "This is a violation. Immediate removal. We have standards. We have rules. We, I said, setting the box down. Don't include me." Her smile showed every tooth she owned. "Willow Creek includes everyone on this street." "Not everyone," I said, and nodded at the concrete seam. "Property line. Your world stops there." She shoved the paper closer. It wasn't even a form. Printer paper with HOA violation scribbled in a bulging Sharpie, the edges curled like the idea itself had been rushed. I laughed before I could stop myself. That laugh landed like a slap. "You think this is funny?" she hissed. "People like you never think rules apply." "People like me," I repeated softly, taking the page. "Homeowners with a deed?" A car door shut down the block. Two men fell into step behind her dark uniforms, hats pulled low, badges polished so bright they looked like mirrors. They moved like theater. Their belts sagged with gear that didn't quite match. One had a walkie with no antenna. The other wore boots so new the creases hadn't formed yet. "Officers," she sang, sweet and sharp. "Remove him. He's trespassing." The taller one stepped forward, hand near a duty belt that held a flashlight instead of a sidearm. "Sir, you need to vacate this property immediately." I studied his badge. It had the right shape, wrong words. "Where's your unit number?" I asked. His eyes flickered. The shorter one's jaw clenched. Karen, of course her name was Karen, folded her arms, triumphant. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way," she said. "We enforce our covenants." "You enforce them on your members," I said. "And I'm not one," she laughed. "Not for long." The taller officer took half a step closer. "Sir." "Before you make a mistake," I said to him quietly, "check your authority." "And hers," Karen rolled her eyes. "He's bluffing." 30 seconds, I said, calm. "Walk away," the shorter one flinched. "Maybe we should—" "You answer to me," she snapped without looking at him. "Arrest him." "Arrest me for what?" I asked. "Owning property?" She leaned in so close I could smell peppermint on her breath. "For ruining what we built." Something in my chest went cold and still. Not fear. Focus. I took out my phone and scrolled to a number I'd set to speed dial the day I wired funds to buy this place. The taller fake's gaze ping-ponged between my thumb and Karen's face. "Don't you dare," she said. "We handle things internally." "You don't handle me at all," I said and pressed call. "County Sheriff," a familiar voice answered. "Mike speaking." "Morning, Mike," I said, watching the taller one's Adam's apple jump. Standing at the Willow Creek line. Two impersonators wearing shiny toys. HOA president coordinating. Mike didn't waste words. "Stay put." Karen's neck blotched red. "You had no right to do that." I tilted my head toward the concrete seam. "I have every right on that side." "And every right on this one." She recovered fast like someone who'd practiced. "They're here to keep the peace." "From who?" I asked. "Your marker? Your paper?" An engine revved behind us. A tow truck rolled up and idled across my driveway, blocking my truck at an angle that screamed petty. A man with a clipboard hopped out, chewing a toothpick. "Got an order to remove a nuisance vehicle," he said to nobody. Karen's hand shot up like she was calling a play. "That truck violates our street view ordinance." "You don't have an ordinance over here," I said. "Move the tow or I'll have it cited for trespass." The tow driver looked between Karen and me and decided his paycheck made the rules. He lined up his winch with my front tire. My jaw tightened. I pulled the rubber corner of the concrete seam up with my shoe and showed him the old stake beneath it, rusted iron in a square notch filled with dirt. "County marker," I said. "If your wheel touches past this line, you're off private property and onto mine. That makes your boss very unhappy when the report lands." He stared. He didn't move. He didn't hook the tire either. A kid on a scooter rolled to a stop at the sidewalk, shoes scuffed, hair sticking up in a crown. He whispered to his mom without taking his eyes off us. She put a hand on his shoulder and filmed from her hip. On the second floor of the tan house across the way, a curtain breathed and a lens glinted. Half the street was watching without wanting to look like it. Karen snapped her fingers. Two more people approached from the clubhouse end. A man with a white polo and a tape measure hanging from his back pocket, and a woman with an iPad that had a cracked screen but a whole lot of confidence. "Our inspector," Karen announced, pointing to the polo. "Our treasurer," she added, tipping her chin at the iPad. "We are fully authorized." "Authorized to what?" I asked. "Trespass, harass, forge letters?" Her smile went sugar-sweet. "To enforce community standards." I reached into the top box on my porch and pulled out a thick folder. Property photos, county GIS printouts, the plat map with meets and bounds so boring it could put a tiger to sleep. I fanned the pages in a slow, lazy wave and then turned the top sheet around so the camera in the tan house could see. 2 black rectangles shaded, Willow Creek Annexation 2006. A third rectangle, the one I now stood on, left blank like a missing tooth. An island just outside the HOA's crown. "Your annexation stopped here," I said, tapping the line with my finger. "You needed a vote to take this parcel." "You never had it." She didn't look down. She stared holes through my face. "We had unanimous consent." "Show me the minutes," I said. "Our records," the treasurer said, holding up the iPad like a shield, "are internal." "Not when you use them to invite criminals with toy badges," I said. Sirens feathered the air, distant but closing. The tow driver's toothpick slowed as he chewed. The taller fake cop wiped a hand on his pants leg. The shorter one's throat worked. Karen didn't blink. "You are going to learn that we are not the kind of neighborhood that lets standards slide." "You're going to learn," I said quietly. "That paperwork beats lies." She moved closer, a smile so tight it looked like pain. "People like you move in and push and demand. And then what?" I asked. "You fine them until they sell? You send officers until the kids are scared to ride bikes? You change locks while people are at work?" Her eyes flashed, too fast. You enforce fear," I said. The first cruiser turned the corner and rolled to a stop like a punctuation mark. Sheriff Mike stepped out, face set in that careful way lawmen wear when the camera is already rolling. He scanned everything at once. Karen's posture, the tow, the badges, my folder. His gaze circled and came to rest on me. He dipped his chin an inch. "We'd played poker once a year for 4 years at a charity thing he ran." He knew when I was bluffing. He also knew I rarely did. "Morning," he said to the group at large. "Who called in impersonators?" "I did," I said. "He lied," Karen blurted. "They're security." "You told them to arrest me," I added. "And to fire them if they didn't." Mike didn't look at me. He looked at the taller fake. The man took a micro step back. Mike took a micro step forward. The body cam on his chest winked in the sun. "Badges," he said. "Now," they hesitated. The shorter one unclipped his and laid it on Mike's palm. Mike didn't have to examine it long. "Amazon special," he said, no humor in it. Karen flushed. "We are trying to keep our neighborhood safe from what?" Mike asked, finally turning to her. "From a property owner moving boxes? He's not subject to our bylaws," she said. "That can't stand," Mike turned to me. "You got the deed?" I handed him the folder. He took it without glancing at Karen and flipped 3 pages like a man used to sorting wheat from chaff. He whistled through his teeth at the plat map. Whoever marked this up did my job for me. I like to make things easy, I said. Not for everyone, he said, and his lips twitched. Neighbors drifted closer, orbiting the edge of the concrete seam like it might burn their shoes. A tall, older man with a veteran's baseball cap muttered, "She fined me $500 for a flagpole 2 inches too high." A woman in a floral dress said, "She made us paint our house 3 times because the white wasn't white enough." A teenager with acne scars and a skateboard said, "She called cops on me for chalk on the sidewalk." "Noise," Karen said, dismissive, "from people who resent standards. None of that is relevant." "It's a pattern," I said, "and patterns tell stories." "Stories don't matter in law," Karen said, with the confidence of someone who'd never lost a battle she could control. "Documents matter." "Documents," I said, "are exactly why you're in trouble." Mike set the folder on the hood of his cruiser and clicked his radio. Another unit eased in behind the tow. A deputy slid out, eyes behind dark lenses, stance loose. He said nothing. He didn't have to. "Here's what's going to happen," Mike said. He nodded at the fake cops. "You 2 are coming with us for questioning. Impersonating an officer is a felony in this county. If you run, the cameras on every porch will make sure your mothers know." The taller one swallowed and put his hands out, palms up like he wanted the cuffs gentle. The shorter one stared at Karen like she could still save him with a word. She looked at him like he was a bad purchase. "You can't do this," she said to Mike. "I'm the HOA president." "And I'm the sheriff," he said matter-of-factly. "We both have authority. The difference is mine doesn't end at that seam." Her face flickered. Rage, then panic, then something that almost looked like grief. "He will ruin everything," she whispered, more to herself than to anyone. "We built this. We keep it good. We keep out people who don't fit your picture," I said. Sirens downshifted and cut. The air changed when the sound died, like a spell breaking. The tow driver backed his truck 6 inches without being told. 2 deputies collected the badges and read the men their cautions in voices so calm it sounded like bedtime. Mike lifted the folder again and flipped to the last section where I'd tabbed the boring stuff nobody watches on TV. Copies of a special meeting notice without signatures, a vote tally with more ballots than houses, and an annexation addendum whose PDF metadata said author Ann Lasky and created 2:12 a.m. "Who's Ann?" Mike asked casually. Karen's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. "Our secretary," she said. "But this is harassment." "It's discovery," I said. "You annexed a lot without a vote because you wanted to extend your jurisdiction to the street behind mine so you could control parking for your summer garden tour. The annexation failed in 2016. You tried again at 2 in the morning last spring on paper." "You don't know anything," she said, but it sounded like sand in a dry throat. "My wife trains SWAT," I said. "She says the same thing before every entry. Check your corners. Check your paperwork." A thin, sharp silence fell. A black SUV rolled up and stopped slow. The driver's door opened and my wife stepped out, ponytail, plain t-shirt, the kind of posture that makes a room aware of itself. She lifted a hand to me, then took in the scene with a sweep that wouldn't miss a nail head. Calm eyes, no jewelry. "Shoes you could run in?" "Hi," she said to Mike. "You found the party." "Always do," Mike said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Karen watched my wife the way a cat watches a dog on the sidewalk. "Who is this?" she snapped. "Someone who could teach you about boundaries," my wife said mildly, and the floral-dressed neighbor laughed once, an incredulous bark she tried to hide. Karen shook her head as if physically dislodging us. "You can bring your whole family and it won't matter. We have processes." "Good," I said. "Let's use them." "What do you mean?" she said, suspicious. "I mean, we'll do this by the book," I said. "And that book isn't yours." We did it faster than she expected. Mike suggested firmly that the board convene an emergency meeting in the clubhouse an hour later. "Since you tried to turn a civil nothing into a criminal something on a public street," he added so the cameras could hear. Let's get some sunlight on your books. Sunlight. It turns out is a disinfectant and a spotlight. The clubhouse smelled like old coffee and new fear. Metal folding chairs scraped. A line of neighbors formed at the back table where someone had set out a ledger like a votive candle. The treasurer hands, shaking now, tapped at her cracked iPad and tried to smile and asked everyone to please be civil. Karen stood at the front, back straight, planner open, the posture of command. I stood near the projector with a thumb drive and the permission of the sheriff to plug in. We started with the easy stuff. The plat, the seam, the boring, bland map that had never lied. Then we moved to the meeting minutes. March 12th, I read, and the projector threw Ann Lasky's name across the screen as if a skywriter had been paid by the letter. Adjourned 7:45 p.m. I clicked to the next slide. Metadata created 1:52 a.m. the same night, murmurs. A neighbor with a baby took a picture of the screen and sent it to someone who sent it to everyone. Karen tried to interrupt. This is out of context. You'll get context, I said. But first you get receipts. The next slide was a spreadsheet. That should have been identical to the one in the treasurer's binder, but wasn't. Rows of maintenance. Projects to a company called Willow Creek. Improvements LLC. A few thousand here, 8,000 there, 20 for stamped concrete that nobody could remember. On the second tab, the list of authorized signers. On the third, the incorporation record. Registered agent, I said, tapping the line. Mason Jansen. A man in the third row made a noise like a kicked bucket. He looked down at his shoes and up at the ceiling in the same motion. The treasurer whispered, "Oh, God." Karen didn't blink. "Who's Mason?" I asked, though I knew. Several heads swiveled to the left where a man in a suit stared very hard at the wall. "Karen's brother-in-law," someone said too loud, and then apologized to the room even though it was too late for that. "This is a smear," Karen said, composed by force. "We are volunteers. Sometimes we make decisions quickly. And yes, family helps family. It's practical." "It's conflict of interest," Mike said from the back. He wasn't on stage. He didn't need to be. I brought up the video next. Grainy night vision from a camera the neighbor with the veteran hat had mounted in his eaves after his daughter's car got booted for parking a tire on a line. The footage showed two men in black polos lifting a box from the porch of the gray house, the one with the cracked fountain, while Karen's car idled at the curb. The timestamp was 2:11 a.m. The box label faced the lens, clear as a daydream. Documents HOA. The room sucked in a breath and didn't let it out until the video ended and started again on a loop in a small window. "This is outrageous," Karen said. Her control slipped, then came back. You could hear the clutch grind. "I told them to secure records for safekeeping. We have rules about storage." "You have rules about storage," I said. "You don't have rules about burglary." The boy with the skateboard stood up without waiting to be recognized. "She told the cops I sold drugs," he said, voice shaking. "Because I had friends over. She told my mom she'd have us evicted. She threatened to fine me $200 a day if I didn't cut my jacaranda," the floral dress woman said, face red. "It's a protected tree." I looked it up. She didn't care. "She said we vote on what's ugly." "You can't vote against gravity," the veteran said, almost to himself. "And truth has weight." The room turned all at once, and it didn't turn to me. It turned to the projector. The plat map sat there like a witness who suddenly remembered everything. Karen stood very still. Then she did something I didn't expect. She softened her voice. "I have carried this community," she said. "I have given up evenings and weekends. I have kept the lawns short and the paint bright and the crime low. You think money doesn't matter? It does. To keep this place like this costs. You think rules don't matter? They do. People who don't fit ruin things. I kept them out." A hush spread, some pity, some anger, some fatigue that came from holding your breath for a very long time. I stood there and felt strangely sad, not for her power, but for the hole she'd filled with it. Then I remembered the boy's voice and the camera at 2 in the morning and the tow truck angled across the seam, and the sadness hardened into something simple. "This neighborhood can be beautiful without fear," I said. "You built a white fence and told yourself it was a halo. But it's a barrier. If you wanted to keep things good, you should have followed the law you love to wield." "It's complicated," she said. It's paperwork, I said, and paperwork beats lies. The vote to suspend her wasn't unanimous, but it wasn't close. The treasurer resigned quietly and slid her iPad across the table like a surrender flag. Ann Lasky cried in short, jagged sobs that sounded like a machine catching. The white polo inspector slipped out the side door and into the bright afternoon where the sound of a lawnmower drifted like normal life. Mike collected statements without hurry and with a patience that felt like daylight. By sunset, the tow truck was gone. The fake cops were booked. The HOA accounts were flagged for a forensic audit. Karen sat on her front steps, staring at nothing, while a deputy posted a notice on the clubhouse door about an emergency receivership hearing the next morning at the county courthouse. The sky went pink, then peach, then that particular blue that makes you look up and believe tomorrow might be kinder. I stood on my new porch with a cold glass sweating in my palm. The veteran walked over with 2 beers and set one down on my step. He nodded at the concrete seam. "Funny, isn't it?" he said. "How 18 inches can hold so much." "It's not the inches," I said. "It's what people put on them." He squinted into the last of the light. "You really an investigator?" he asked. "Or was that theater?" "Both," I said. "Theater helps with bullies. Paper helps with judges." He laughed, a low, rusty sound. "You staying?" he asked. "I bought it to make a point," I said. Then I realized the point was a place. My wife leaned her shoulder against mine. "We'll need a better deadbolt," she said, practical as always. "And cameras." "We'll give the footage to the DA tomorrow," I said. "And then?" she asked. "And then," I said, looking down the street where porch lights wobbled on one by one like cautious stars, "we watch the gravity do its job." The courthouse the next morning smelled like lemon cleaner and old paper. Karen arrived in a blazer 1 shade lighter than the resignation on her face. Her lawyer talked fast without saying much. The judge brown hair gone gray at the temples. Tired eyes that had seen every version of the human story listened, hands folded, and asked simple questions that complicated liars' hate. "Show me the vote tally from 2016, he said. "They couldn't. "Show me the contract bids for the stamped concrete," he said. They showed one, the brother-in-law's. The judge sighed the sigh of a man whose breakfast was cold. The DA's office took our drive, and then our backup of the drive, and then a chain of custody form that would outlive all of us. Ann's midnight minutes, the night video, the toy badges, the invoices with the same routing number as a personal account. The judge put the HOA into temporary receivership with an outside firm. He ordered an election under county supervision. If the audit didn't turn up more rot than a banana forgotten in a hot car. The street felt different by afternoon. Lighter. The boy with the skateboard practiced kickflips without looking, over his shoulder every 20 seconds. The floral dress woman clipped dead blooms from her roses without glancing at a measuring tape. The veteran stood a flag in his holder 1 inch higher than yesterday and dared the sky to complain. I dragged a couch inside with a neighbor I'd met that morning who said his name was Tom and that he fixed things for a living and that he hadn't slept right in a year. Karen's house stayed closed. At dusk, a news van prowled and left when it realized justice moves quiet most of the time. My wife hung 2 photographs in the living room, one of a coast road we love, one of my dad in a flannel shirt showing me how to hold a level. The house breathed. You can tell when a place decides you're not a stranger. 2 days later, the county posted an audit notice. 2 weeks later, the DA filed charges, falsifying records, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit impersonation. The brother-in-law tried to cut a deal, and in doing so, cut his sister-in-law's legs. There is something about paperwork that humbles bravado. Commas can end careers. The tow company sent a letter of apology. The white polo inspector turned out to be a handyman who had been promised contracts if he wore a tape measure where everyone could see it. He returned a set of keys he shouldn't have had. A month later, a new board sat on the clubhouse dais. People with voices that shook not from anger, but from the weight of being seen. They put up a big sign at the entrance that said, "Welcome," in a font that would make designers itch but made kids grin. They rewrote bylaws with a lawyer who spoke plain. They published minutes with the ugly truth included, and they added a line at the end of every meeting. Public comment is not a formality. The skateboard kid helped paint a mural on the side of the clubhouse, a lake, a tree, a street, and a line that wasn't a barrier but a path. On a Tuesday with bright ordinary light, I was coming back from the hardware store with a box of screws and a pack of zip ties when Karen stopped me at the seam. She looked 10 years older and 5 pounds lighter. She didn't have a clipboard. Her hands were empty. "You won," she said, and it didn't sound like a compliment. "No," I said gently. "The rules did." She flinched, then nodded once, slow. "Do you ever wonder?" she asked, eyes on the line. "What happens if nobody keeps order?" "Order isn't control," I said. "It's consent." She looked up then, really looked. "I thought if I let one thing slide," she said, "it would all slide." "You can't vote against gravity," I said. And she almost smiled, like the line had finally landed in her chest. She stepped back. "I'm leaving," she said. "My sister has a place out east." "Near water?" "Good," I said. "Maybe you'll sleep." She hesitated, then said, "I am sorry about the boy." "Tell him," I said. She didn't, but she told the board she wouldn't contest the election, and in the math of human frailty that counted for something. The night the audit finished, the board projected the summary on the clubhouse wall, and everybody brought lawn chairs because Wi-Fi is for screens and community is for bodies. The numbers were stark. Money went where it shouldn't. Boxes moved when they shouldn't. Fear had been a currency. We all watched the projector and the moths batting at the warm bulb, and then we looked at each other, and some of us cried, and some of us laughed, and all of us breathed. The board voted to create a neighborhood fund for people one fine away from a catastrophe. They hired an independent inspector with credentials you could sneeze on without them dissolving. They put benches under the jacaranda the floral dress woman had saved and wrote a little sign that said, "Please sit. It's shade." On my porch, months later, I could still find the mark where the tow truck's tire had scuffed the concrete. My wife teased me about not scrubbing it. I kept it on purpose. Not as a scar, as a note, a reminder that power chokes when it can't stand light. That a deed is a promise written down, that a seam is not a moat. That sometimes you buy a house to change an address, and sometimes you buy a house to change a story. One Saturday morning, a little girl from 2 doors over ran her finger along the seam and asked her mom, "Is this where the bad lady lived?" Her mom knelt and said, "No, baby. This is where we remembered who we are." The veteran saluted the air like it had earned it. The skateboard kid taught 2 younger kids how to ollie without scraping their knees. The floral dress woman brought lemonade that was too tart and perfect. Mike drove by slow, rolled down his window, and lifted his coffee in a salute. He didn't need to stop. He'd already done the work that mattered. I looked at the people who had been afraid and now were not, and I said it to myself like a mantra and a law. Paperwork beats lies. You can't vote against gravity, and if someone tells you you can't live here, the answer is not a shout or a fist. It's a deed laid flat, a map held high, a story told out loud until the cameras catch the truth and the truth catches up. When night fell, porch lights bloomed in warm circles, and fireflies stitched little signatures in the dark yards. I sat on the steps with my wife, our shoulders pressed together, and listened to a neighborhood that had found its own sound again. Not sirens, not shouting, not the nervous chatter of people checking if they were safe. Just forks on plates and a dog's chain clinking and a kid saying, "Watch this," and being sure someone would, and that's how it stayed. Not perfect. Nothing good is. But better in the way that counts. A place where rules are real because we chose them. A place where a line on concrete is just a line, not a leash. A place where, when the next bully decides to strut over a seam with paper and a scowl, the street already knows what to do. They look down at the map. They look up at each other. And they say together, with sunlight in their throats, "This is our home."